AdLib is the DSP-agnostic buying platform to scale your programmatic campaigns smarter, faster, and more profitably. AdLib helps independent agencies and marketers deliver premium programmatic performance without the complexity, cost, or overhead of traditional DSPs. Their platform provides the tools, data, and automation to run enterprise-quality campaigns, from CTV and audio to geofencing and YouTube, all under one roof with zero trafficking headaches. Plus, they're not just a platform, they're your growth partner. The AdLib team helps you win new business, expand budgets, and deliver measurable ROI that keeps clients coming back. It's time to unlock programmatic. Join leading marketers worldwide who are using AdLib to deliver more campaigns with better results. Check out getadlib.com. Hey guys, Joe here. We have an awesome episode coming up with Allie Colman, a tax partner at the accounting firm Aprio. This podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and should not be construed as tax, legal, or financial advice. You should consult your own professional advisors regarding your specific circumstances. Joe and Eric are clients of Aprio, the firm discussed in this episode, but Aprio did not pay for or sponsor this interview, and all opinions expressed are those of the participants. Enjoy the episode, guys. Welcome to Open Market, a podcast about building companies in the advertising industry. I'm Joe Zappa. I'm joined by Eric, Franchi, and Allie Colman, a tax partner at the accounting firm Aprio. Isn't that right, Allie?
You nailed it, Joe. You nailed it.
And Eric just learned how to say that because he was really putting on the gabagool heavy and just being like, apparently he always thought it was pronounced Aprio.
That's our international name.
There we go. Where I come from, that I think would be how the folks would say it. And Allie, welcome to Open Market. Thank you for joining us today. The reason why we wanted to do this episode is because a lot of our listeners are CEOs and founders of various stages of ad tech businesses. We will let you talk about Aprio in a second, about your background and what Aprio does and for whom. But you've advised a lot of companies that I know at various stages of just like what they should be thinking about, whether they're at the founding, the operating, ultimately exit stage, or even, personal implications for the founders. So what we thought would be neat is just like, let's, kind of walk through the startup life cycle and a couple of things that founders should be thinking about at each stage that, you've seen people either do right, do wrong, and have big implications down the road, if that sounds cool with you.
That's what I love to do. So yes, please.
Awesome. For people not familiar with Aprio and what the company does and for whom, why don't you tell us?
As Joe mentioned, Allie Colman, I'm a tax partner, but I also lead our technology industry group in the Northeast. So I advise, as Eric insinuated, companies really from very early stage to what type of entity should we be, all the way through exit, where we're talking about where their money should go for their future grandchildren at the time of a liquidity event. So Aprio works with businesses really regardless of the size. We love to come in early stage to set a solid foundation for you to grow on, especially tech companies today. I can't, how far are we into this? And I'm going to say AI already. I'm sorry.
Okay.
But in the AI age that we're living in, it's very easy to start a business and it's very easy for a business to grow very quickly. So we want to get in very early on to make sure that we aren't making mistakes, that 83B elections are being filed properly. I will caveat and say accountants and tax people love an acronym and they love numbers and they love tax code. And I hate to talk like that, but sometimes you have to. So Aprio is the 20th largest accounting firm. I work in our office in the Empire State Building, but headquartered in Atlanta and really all over the nation.
Okay, let's just then get into the founding stage. We had a couple of questions that are, I think, super tactical, but okay, let's say we're starting a business tomorrow, Joe and I, and we're using AI. We've got some ideas and perhaps even a line of sight of revenue. What should we do to optimize for setting up the business and being tax efficient and setting the stage?
I would say the first thing is talking about the type of entity that you're creating. Using the two of you in your real life as an example, I'd say probably set up a C corporation, because in that instance, you're able to set your future selves up for success. Sometimes first-time founders might want to start with an LLC because they really use their business as a personal bank account. They take the money in and out. They view it just as an extension of themselves. But if you're creating a real business, a C Corp will help you with future avoidance of taxes because you can be a qualified small business.
Got it. Qualified small business. This is the QSBS that everybody talks about. What is QSBS? Why is it important? What needs to be true to qualify for it?
That everybody talks about, everybody who's a huge business nerd. Yes, but I feel like it's true. And by the way, we did bring on Allie, the accountant, because our producer was like, this show needs to be more fun. We were like, we have a great idea, accountant.
I hope I, don't fit the typical accountant stereotype.
Yeah,
definitely.
no, I've never met a polished Jewish lady who's a great accountant, but you're the first one. But yeah,
I love it.
so QSBS, how do we dodge taxes legally?
Legally, yes. So I tried avoiding the acronym, Eric, but yes, QSBS is qualified small business stock. And essentially, it's the Internal Revenue Code's best kept secret because it allows business owners to avoid paying taxes on capital gains at a future sale. So we're going to keep it very high level. But if you have original issue in C Corp stock and the stock at the time that you get it, the business has less than $50 million in assets. If you got the stock after July 4th, 2025, you get an increase to 75 million. And you hold the stock for at least 5 years, you can exclude capital gain at the time of a stock sale. There's a few other requirements, active business tests and other things like that. But the real main thing that matters is original issue in C Corp stock and the value of the assets, and that you can't just have a ton of cash sitting on your balance sheet. You have to use your money.
Got it. Okay. That makes perfect sense. The other acronym that we hear a lot at the founding stage that I think people need to understand and know about is ISOs versus NSOs. Like, what's the difference? Should we care about this? Where do people get stuff wrong?
Yep. All the time, everywhere. So ISO means incentive stock option. NSO means non-qualified stock option. The reason why that's a great tool for a new business is because it allows you to compensate your employees without giving them cash. So cash is key in the early stages of a business. Your runway of how long you can keep your business running is important, but you need to pay your employees somehow. So an incentive stock option is a way for you to give equity in the business to an employee or an option to buy equity to an employee. A non-qualified stock option can be given to employees and contractors. So that's difference number one. But something that's important is both of these things are just options to buy stock. So you don't have stock if you give someone an option. They have to exercise their option in order for them to actually have stock and get that QSBS ticker of that 5 years running. So the big thing is the ISOs are to employees. You don't pay ordinary income tax on an ISO, so that's a huge win. Whereas a non-qualified stock option can go to anyone. And at the time of exercise, I have to pay tax on. So you'd rather give people incentive stock options, despite the fact that most founders don't want to put anyone on payroll.
Okay. So C Corp qualifies us for QSBS. We want to be qualified for QSBS from a founding standpoint, and ISOs from a equity standpoint as we scale the team. Anything else we should be thinking about at this stage, the founding stage?
I would say the other option of equity is probably relevant to talk about, of restricted stock. That's nice because restricted stock has to have restrictions. So you can use that as really a retention tool. So if you have an employee that you want to give equity to, but you want to make sure that they don't leave you in 3 years, because we all know the job market these days, loyalty is very rare. If you give someone restricted stock, they don't get anything until their restrictions lapse. So it can be over a 5-year period. You can have restrictions that they vest at a liquidity event in the future. And that gives equity to your employees, but it also incentivizes them to stay with the business.
If I'm a founder and I'm thinking holistically about my first, 10 to 20 employees and how I'm going to pay and incentivize them, obviously, generally, with a, C Corp style tech startup, you are not going to be paying as high a dollar amount for a salary, and you're going to have all these different kinds of incentives. So you already talked about a few different forms of compensation that a founder could provide. What is sort of the holistic array of options they should be thinking about for an early employee comp package?
So I would say something that a lot of companies leave on the table that the IRS really incentivizes, there's such thing as a startup 401k plan. that the IRS actually gives you tax credits for starting up. So the fee that you would normally pay me to set it up, you get it back in taxes. So an early stage employee, they care about their future retirement. Their parents are telling them they need to care. So you give them cash compensation. You give them some sort of equity. So they are really vested in the future of the business. And then I think you put yourselves in their shoes and you say, we're going to also allow you to set yourself up for retirement by starting this retirement 401k plan for startups. That people oftentimes would think that those are for the larger companies, but that's not always true.
Yeah. And I think often when founders don't think about that kind of thing up front, like you're going to end up thinking about it at some point. And so this is something I think, Eric, that we also hear often from second-time founders when they come on the pod is like a first-time founder, they never think, and I include myself in this, like we never think about this stuff in the beginning because you're just starting and you're like, F it, I'm just like vibe coding my agents. Like I can't be bothered with like 401ks. And founders hate this stuff, right? Like I never want to hear about my like retirement program, but like I need to have one and so it needs to be figured out. But anyway, second-time founders, like they get a partner like Aprio and they get this squared away from the beginning. Whereas like first-time founders often, you're hacking it together and it's like in year 3 that you start thinking about this stuff.
Honestly, Joe, I think it's because, and a client that I work with that Eric knows well came to us because he got screwed on his first exit. And it's oftentimes that you need to get screwed before you realize the value that certain service providers you save money in the long run by hiring someone like us sooner.
Let's jump to the operating stage. So Joe and my business, we're doing all right, right? This is year 2, year 3. We're first-time founders. We may not have done things perfectly from the beginning because we were vibe coding. What's like the most expensive mistake that you see? Let's assume it's venture-backed founders, right? Or high growth. Make that they don't feel until year 2 or year 3. And then all of a sudden, Joe and I are just like, what the hell did we do?
I would say a crappy cap table or not managing a cap table properly. That's a problem. If you and Joe decided at a bar one night that you guys were going to share this business 50-50 and no one documented it, that's not great. You need to have your stock award. Not that I've ever seen it. And not that either of you would ever do that. But yes, I think making sure your cap table is well maintained is huge. I would also say getting not great 409A valuations throughout as you're giving up equity. You need to make sure that equity has a value at that time. 409A valuations are necessary, but 409A valuations sometimes they will carve out that it doesn't apply to options. So if we're talking year 2, you and Joe have employees now, you've been giving some ISOs out. And when it comes time to look at the value of what each person has, if you didn't make sure your valuation included the value of options, now when you guys are a real business, someone's going to have to go back and redo the work. So you paid for a good value. It's just not holistic of everything you need. I would say that's it. And then not taking advantage of the free money the IRS is going to give you.
Say more.
Money. Exactly. Your year's perk. The R&D credit. People think that income tax credits, if you're not making money, are useless. 0 is 0, Allie. If I'm not paying any tax, why do I care about a tax credit? Well, you may not pay income tax, but you're paying payroll taxes if you have employees. So if business is in a loss position, you're in the first 5 years, you have less than $5 million in revenue, you can use your R&D credit to offset the employer portion of payroll taxes up to $500,000. Speaks for itself.
So it's like $500,000 of free money.
It's a combination of the payroll to your employees that are in the US that are doing R&D, your cloud-based costs, and now that we're, again, AI, your token costs, and then your independent contractors where the R&D is being performed in the US. Combine them, roughly 9%. And that's how much your R&D credit could be per year. And you could take advantage of the R&D offset for the first 5 years until your business has $5 million in revenue.
Okay. I was wondering about what the criteria for that are, like both in terms of limits, like you said, 5 million in revenue, but then also like, is there a particular kind of R&D? Do you need to prove some kind of like pro-social benefit or something like that? Or you can just be doing whatever?
It's just technology.
Yeah. Technology. So you need to be I had a call about this morning. There needs to be some sort of uncertainty in what you're doing. If your website is a blue background and you want to make it orange, the time that your people are incurring for that doesn't count. But if you have engineers on payroll and they're making 2.0 of something, or if your competitors have a feature and you're like, I want to do that feature too, I just need to figure out how, it can be done. You just need to figure it out yourself. All of those costs and those projects qualify as R&D.
That's interesting. So it's interesting also, Eric, to zoom out and think about like the sort of macroeconomic policy implications here, because I think taxes, Allie, are something that people are talking about all the time in politics, but especially right now, right? With like the wealth tax stuff and whatever. And I think where a lot of that comes from is consumers see like the Elon Musks of the world and they're like, essentially they're like, you're not paying enough taxes. So I think it's interesting to think about both and to clear up myths about both the kinds of taxes these people and these companies do pay, right? Which I would like to hear you talk about, actually, because you often hear sound bites like, oh, Amazon pays zero taxes. And I'm like, that sounds incorrect. I think they pay a lot of taxes, but they might not pay a certain kind that people are zeroing in on. But then also all the benefits that they do get, right? Like to cover both sides of the issue. So do you guys mind if we like zoom out for a sec? I'm curious, just like when you hear something like that, Allie, like in the popular discourse, like, oh, Amazon pays zero taxes or something like that. What's your reaction as an expert?
That's not true. It's a fun headline. And I think it's something that gets the world talking, but they don't pay no taxes. First of all, to your point, and I appreciate the question, Joe, because there are numerous taxes. Amazon is a massive company, and they pay their tax advisors a lot of money to minimize their tax. They're global. So when people say taxes, it's income tax most of the time that they're looking at. And there are certain businesses that the IRS wants, and the U.S. wants there to be more of. Research is one of them. Manufacturing is another one of them. There's a lot of different credits that exist in the U.S. to reduce your tax liability. Yes, research and development is one. In the restaurant industry, there's a FICA tip credit. They want more businesses to thrive in the United States. I have a client in healthcare that takes a work opportunity tax credit. What does that mean? If their employees are veterans or if they meet certain criteria, then they get a credit, an income tax credit for hiring these types of people that oftentimes have a harder time getting jobs. So Amazon, in their factories, in their warehouses, they are hiring people like that, and that's allowing them to reduce their income tax bill. Amazon is paying am I allowed to say bad words?
Yeah, go for it.
We encourage it. Yeah.
Are you going to say a fuck ton? I hope you are.
I'll drop Amazon pays a fuck ton of payroll taxes. They also are paying sales tax. They are paying a lot of different taxes that are going to the government. So to make a holistic statement that Amazon doesn't pay tax is that's not true.
Yeah, I think it's really important to have those conversations because it always drives me insane, right? Because I own a small business, right? I own a marketing agency, and like I see all the different kinds of taxes like we pay, right? And I'm like, it's, those companies, I'm sure they're paying like billions in like different kinds of taxes, right? And so, they might have certain credits that they get, but it's important to just be honest about the contributions that they do make to, the government coffers, along with all those incentives they may be reaping the benefits of.
1,000%. And I think one of the old partners I used to work with, you can't forget about the states. States tax everything as well. So you can't just look at the federal government in a bubble. California has a limit right now on lost companies historically that are now making money. California only allows you to use $1 million of net operating loss carry forward a year. That's not great. These businesses have been incurring losses year over year over year. I now have income. I should be able to take advantage of my losses. And California says, not now. We need money in our state to survive. And Texas, they aren't an income-based tax. They're a gross receipts-based tax. So all of the states, I don't want to get too technical here, but all of the states are taxing and finding the ways to get their money from their businesses operating in their state. They all just have a different way of doing it.
Yeah, just to close the loop on this topic, like the innovation incentives, right, in the tax code. It's also really important to understand why those exist, right? Because I think a lot of Americans these days see those incentives. They're like, oh, these are like corporate loopholes, like why, like the corporations are getting away with like not paying taxes. But it's like, especially for startups, right? Like Joe and Eric's hypothetical startup, like they're endeavoring to create something new that might not work. And the very fact that it might not work is why it's so valuable, because they're providing a value to society that doesn't exist yet. But the founders are taking on an enormous amount of risk to pursue that sort of unknown product. And that is what those tax incentives exist to enable. For example, there's been a lot of discourse in New York recently, I think, about closing like QSBS loopholes or whatever. And it's like, I think about like ad tech founders I know, and who are like, let's say they're like 35 years old. They went to great schools, they went to MIT or Princeton or whatever. These are people who could be making millions of dollars a year on Wall Street. And instead, they're making $80,000 a year as they try to build a company, right? That will ideally create a new product that hasn't existed before and provide value to a whole lot of people. And then maybe 10 plus years from now, they'll have a big exit. Their company will get bought and they'll be able to reap the rewards of that. But guess what? Probably not. Like they will probably take on an immense amount of risk and create a bunch of jobs in the process and all this stuff. And they may very well walk away with nothing. And so these incentives exist to encourage people to actually take that risk when usually they have the option to just go like, make money on money, which is great. And I love my friends who work at hedge funds, but it's also good to have people who bring new products and technologies into the world. And that's what those incentives exist to enable.
Perfectly said, Joe. Perfectly said.
That's my rant. I love tax breaks for corporations.
I was going to ask a question around like what impact fully remote or multi-state teams create, but I think after Joe's proclamation, we should just move on to something bigger. All right, let's go with it. Let's say that Joe and I are one of the skilled and lucky and chosen few that get to the point where we've built something that is big and profitable and differentiated, and we have acquirers knocking on our door and we are thinking about an exit. So fast forward 5-10 years. How far ahead of an exit should like tax planning actually start?
I would say 2 to 5 years. 5 years, because that's ideal. Because sometimes I'll have business owners come to me that are still in an LLC formation. Actually, these days it can be reduced down to 3 years, because if you're stuck after July 4th, 2025, you can hold it for 3 years and get a 50% exclusion. We'll leave the technical part aside. If I have a business owner coming to me, I want to make sure they're set up properly in the correct form, being a C corporation. I want to make sure and do a health check of making sure that in their QuickBooks, they don't have a huge dollar amount sitting in Ask My Accountant, which is my favorite QuickBooks account that exists where people put things they don't know where to go. I would also say that it allows me to clean up issues from what might not have been treated properly in the past. Maybe we never filed sales tax returns. Maybe you, to your point, Eric, maybe you have a bunch of employees in states that work from home and you didn't realize that gave you nexus in a state. So now we have to go back and file those returns, because the worst case scenario is a buyer comes in and says, Eric and Joe, your idea is amazing. I'm going to give you $100 million. They hire a firm to do diligence and they say, we need 7 million of that to go into escrow because we think that you guys have an exposure for X, Y, and Z liability. I've seen it happen many times. So we want to make sure that we're being proactive and making sure that at the time of diligence, you're great, because any hesitation or, oh, we're in the middle of filing those things, it holds up a deal and you got to strike while the iron's hot.
Got it. Okay. So like really getting the books in order, so to speak, just way ahead of even the thought of an exit.
So sometimes if I'm talking to a founder, we meet at an event, I'll be like, what does the next 3 to 5 years look like for you? They are so head down into what they're doing today that they can't answer that for me yet. So I get it. You don't if you're a founder listening to this and you're like, oh my God, Allie, you're insane. I can't even think about it. Don't, but make sure that you're like working with an advisor that can raise the flag when it's time to be like, all right, pick your head up a little. I need some of your personal time because we need to plan now. Like shit's getting real.
Yeah. So Eric and I both work with Aprio. And I will say that for me, again, my business is a bit different from the businesses we're talking about because it's a service business. It is an LLC, yada, yada. But I'm still certainly building it to be, you know, a serious business with hopefully one day enterprise value that could sell. And so to me, this is one of the biggest arguments for taking on a more serious sort of accounting firm. You want to make sure, no matter what kind of business you have, that if you are building a real business that will have enterprise value and could one day change hands, you want to ensure that someone is, you know, checking those boxes. And that's something I did with both my law firm and Aprio earlier this year, is sort of said, you know, can you guys kick the tires on this? Like, can we make sure that there are no glaring holes that, as Allie said, one day someone's going to come along and do diligence and be like, we can't acquire this business, or like it's way less valuable than you think because you didn't address XYZ. So I totally agree from the founder perspective. I think that, you know, the founder, it's not our job to think about all of these sorts of things. It is our job to think about them enough to hire people who do think about them.
Yeah.
Well said.
I think it's surrounding yourself, anything in life, right? You need to have like your own personal board of directors around you. You don't want just yes men. You want people to challenge your ideas and make sure that like you're thinking about everything holistically. And that's my job too. So I want to be I'm part of my client's team. I want them to succeed. How exciting is that for me when my clients hit unicorn status? Like when they get a successful exit and their wives are calling me, thanking me for this new house they get to buy. Like it's an amazing feeling to feel like you've been a part of that process. So I totally agree with you, Joe.
So besides getting your stuff in order, perhaps from like the most formative stage, one of the things that, you know, a lot of people talk about is the tax implications of a big exit on founders personally. Is there any like real way to defer or reduce tax on exit proceeds?
So there's various types of exits. If we talk at the basic level, there's the stock deal versus an asset deal. Mm-hmm. The QSBS that we were talking about earlier that allows me to not pay taxes on $10 million or 10 times my basis, that only applies if you sell the stock. So let's talk about stock first. That's where the greatest benefit can be from a tax avoidance perspective, is really being able to qualify that, take advantage of that benefit. Sometimes clients will say, Allie, I can't wait 5 years. Like I said earlier, this guy's interested. It's only been 2 years. I'm not going to say no. In that instance, there's another option, especially for people like you, Eric and Joe, where you can take that proceeds and invest them in another qualified small business. You can avoid the tax then too. You now then have a 2-year holding period built into the new company that you're investing in. Or maybe you were already a founder of this other business and you're putting more money into it. And that will allow you to even further defer those taxes, even if you didn't meet that 5-year holding period on the first endeavor. The difference with an asset sale is that this is where the C Corp double taxation comes in. Because if you sell the assets of a business, the money is coming to the corporation. That means the corporation has to pay tax. And now the shareholders only get what's left. And then they have to pay dividend tax on it. So the corporation's paying tax, then you're paying tax personally on the proceeds you receive. So an asset deal is not as exciting or not as advantageous to a founder, but that's what a buyer wants because they get stepped up basis for an asset sale.
Right. And typically asset sales, in my experience, they are not happening with like high growth, successful, profitable businesses. They're, you know, oftentimes a business that like needs an exit, right?
Exactly. Yep.
Wow. Okay. Oh man. So that stinks. That's like 2 punches in the face. Like the business didn't succeed and you get taxed like crazy out the door. Oof.
I know. It's a big negotiation point because sometimes the buyer will say, I'm not going to look at how much deduction I'm not going to get from doing a stock sale. But something to not forget, they'll get your R&D credit carry forwards in a stock sale. They get your net operating loss carry forwards because the whole business is going. So when you're at the negotiation table, don't sell yourself short. If you have all of these tax attributes, you have to understand they're worth something.
Should we do some founder math here? I think maybe like Allie can provide the accountant perspective and Eric can provide the VC perspective. Like something I think people...
Hold on. I'm not doing public math. I've done it before. I look like an idiot. The answer is no.
I know. Leave it to us. We'll help you. No. So this is what I'm saying. Okay. Let's say you see a story out there, some ad tech founder, the company sells for $1 billion. What I'm trying to get at here, using both of your expertise, is like, what is that person actually often walking away with? And I understand there are a million like nuances, but just like generally speaking, like use it as a hypothetical to help people understand like, okay, so first we're going to say, Eric, let's say that person sells after like Series B or Series C, like what percentage of the company would they usually own? And then Allie can tell us a bit about like the taxes that founder would generally face.
Okay. So we raised a seed, we raised an A, we raised a B. We were diluted 20% each time off of increasing valuations. So founders and the company own what, 40% of the business? And then Joe and I as co-founders, let's say we have 30%. So we each have 15%. So off of $1 billion, we raised a seed at 5, we raised an A at 15, we raised a B at 25. So let's say, we just like raised like $50 million. So 950 million, of which 30%, this is where the fucking public math thing comes in, of which, let's say like 30% goes to us as founders, right? So like high twos, and then 15% ish each goes to us as individuals. So just use round numbers. You want to say 150 million each?
Yeah, but you're actually going too fast for me. Like, I think it is worth breaking this down. So
okay,
you have $1 billion exit, right? You're going through you're saying, okay, 50 million was raised. So take that off the top. And that's because the investors get their money back first. Is that part of the equation?
Yeah. Yeah, of course.
Okay. So then you're saying there's 900. Well, you're saying, of course, but people don't know how that shit works. I mean, some of our audience might, but
no, investors get their capital back first. They also own 60% of the business. So like 600 million goes to the investors, and like, so that's where 400 million is left.
Okay. And then you're saying the company and the founders own, meaning it could also be other people in the company and so on, own 40% of it. And then you're saying each founder has, let's say, 30% of what the company still owns. So 30% of that 400 million. So then each founder is getting 120 million.
Okay.
30% of 400 million.
Why are we doing the math? We have an accountant on the show, Joe.
It's fun. I like this.
I was just getting us to the point. I wanted the Neanderthals, to get to the point where they understood these round numbers that are like, by the way, getting a 500 on the SAT math section level shit. And then we could hand it off to the accountant to say, all right, I'm a founder. I think I've made 120 million on this sale, right? Now the tax man comes, right? Uncle Sam's rounding up to take my dollars. All right. What happens at that point, Allie? Like, what kind of taxes is the founder usually subject to?
So your proceeds are 120 million. You then need to figure out what your basis in your stock was. That's another very important thing that you need to keep track of. That's how much did you pay for it? Oftentimes, founders in the beginning don't pay anything for the shares that they get. And then maybe later on, because of ISOs or because of restricted stock, they do make future payments in the future. So, but it's usually not that much. Eric, in your experience in a Series B founder, how much have they put into the business at that point for their equity? I'm going to be pretty low.
Yeah, of course. Of course. They're using outside capital.
Right. So in this instance, we would be left with we'll just use zero basis, 120 million still would be what I would be subject to for capital gains. If the company was a qualified small business and they held it for the correct amount of time and they did not have tax planning, worst case scenario would be that they would be able to exclude $10 million and not pay tax on $10 million. And they would pay capital gains tax at 20% on the remaining $110 million. The reason why I say worst case scenario is because there's a concept called QSBS stacking. Eric has kids. If Eric set up a trust for each of his children to own a portion of the business, they also get that $10 million exclusion. And Eric could be the beneficiary of those trusts. So, Eric, how many kids do you have?
2.
So now we have Eric, we have his 2 kids. So that's $30 million that we get to exclude that we do not have to pay $1 of tax on. The other thing that comes to play is sometimes founders do have basis. How does that happen? They either paid for their stock, or this is where it might get a little technical and I apologize. If you're an LLC that converts to a C Corp, first know that the LLC becomes the date that the C Corp conversion happens is when the clock starts for QSBS. It doesn't take into account when you were an LLC. It's new from when you're a C Corp. The basis is the value at the time you convert it to a C Corp. So a lot of founders, especially experienced founders, will wait and say, I want to convert when my basis is like $40 million. In that the fair market value of my business is $40 million, because then you can get 10 times that in savings. So a business of $40 million a while ago would not sell for the price we said, but you can exclude in that instance $400 million from capital gains at the time of sale because your basis in the stock was 40 million and it's 10 times that.
Okay.
I know I spoke very quick in founder math.
No,
that's a big number.
Okay, that's pretty juicy. So $1 billion exit, worst case scenario, you're paying, let's say you own 30% of what the business owns. So the business owns 40%. You own 30% of that, which is 12%. That's 120 million. 10 million at least is shielded via QSBS. That's 110. You pay 20% on that, 22 off the top. You walk away with 98 million in our hypothetical example. Not too shabby. You could get a nice house for that.
Maybe 2 houses.
Among other things, maybe a jet. I don't know. Jets, it's probably not worth it anyways. It's just so much to deal with. All right. So, just sell for $1 billion. You'll walk away with 98 is fine. Allie might help you walk away with all of it. You don't know. It depends on the frickin', the voodoo you're doing around when you become a C Corp and then you're QSBS. You can go bananas with that shit.
Legal voodoo.
Mm-hmm. Legal, yes.
You mentioned something really neat, which was, setting up the trusts for children, which is probably a whole other conversation. Besides things like that, what should be set up before such a liquidity event? Maybe it's on the estate side, maybe it's on the charitable side, not after, to, hopefully further optimize things from a tax perspective, if at all.
Yeah, obviously the trusts are the big ones, like grantor trusts and gifting out minority interests in your corporation. I would say donor advised funds is another tool that people use. I personally advise more on the business side. So these are things that I'll bring in other people to help me with. But donor advised funds and trusts, I would say, are the top 2 things that I see us recommend for people to consider earlier than later. Because there is a problem if you gift and that a deal is happening. The IRS is smarter than you think they are, unfortunately. So they want you to avoid that.
Got it. Okay. Is there anything else maybe from the business perspective, now that we're at the, the end of the life cycle and, approaching the end of the pod even, that we didn't cover that, is super important that are just mistakes or gotchas?
I would say the only thing that I didn't touch on was that I said very early beginning is an 83B election. There might be people on the call that get restricted stock. And I just want you people to be aware that if you get restricted stock, my favorite part of talking to founders, employees is they're like, oh, I'm employee number 6. oh, I was employee number 12. Like they would brand it on their arm, like they were so this company. If you are one of those employees, or if you are of a new business and you get restricted stock, make an 83B election if you believe in the business. What you're doing is you're saying, I want to pay tax on the value of my stock today, probably close to $0, instead of when it vests 5 years from now. Because if you have stock in Eric and Joe's company, they're going to be selling for $1 billion. You heard it here. So would you rather pay tax on $1 billion or $0 of ordinary income tax? So you need to make that 83B election within 30 days of grant. You can't make it the day before the sale and be like, oh, I wish I did that. You're betting on your founders. I will say it's a bet. But if you are such an early on employee where the value is very low, then there's really no downside in you taking that hedge on your company that you think the value is going to go up, because you're going to save yourself a lot of taxes in the long run.
And 83Bs can now be filed online. You used to have to go to the post office back in my day, Joe. Not anymore. No,
I don't even know what a post office is. So let's say you're employee number 6 at Joe and Eric's company, and you're getting 2% of the company or something like that. So then in our hypothetical example, right, the company still owned 40% at the end. So it would be you would get 2% of that 40%. So you would have 0.8% of the overall company, right? So you would have 1% of $1 billion would be 10 million. So you would have $8 million. So that person, you're saying if they do the 83B election, they could walk away with that full 8 million. Whereas if not, it would be subject to cap gains, or does it work a different way?
Oh, what I will say is that person will walk away with the 8 billion, but because of QSBS. The way that the 83B comes along is in your example, let's say this employee number 6 got their equity through restricted stock.
Mm-hmm.
When the business vests, let's say you say they vest at the time of a liquidity event, if they didn't make an 83B election, they would have to pay ordinary income tax on the $8 million. That's terrible. That's worst case scenario.
Yeah.
Instead, this person came in and made an 83B election, paid $0 of ordinary income tax on day one. They would be subject to capital gains tax on the 8 million, but because of QSBS, they pay $0, and employee number 6 is walking away with no taxes. Federally.
Okay. So the QSBS, it doesn't just shield the founders, it also shields early employees or
investors, everybody's
with stock.
Yeah,
everybody.
Any owner who holds it for more than 5 years, or for a new business, 3 years, you get a 50% exclusion. 4 years, you get a 75% exclusion. And 5 years is 100%.
Mm-hmm.
Employee number 6 is happy.
Employee number 6, their house, they still can't buy an apartment in Manhattan, but they could buy a normal house, where Eric lives or something. Where you guys live in New Jersey, they can buy a house.
And they could pay for their kids' education. They could buy a new car.
Yeah, whatever.
Tallest dwarf.
Yeah.
What was the line from Succession? Anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. This has been incredibly insightful and informative. Different kind of conversation that we normally have, but I think the founders and the CEOs are going to get a lot out of this. How can people get in touch with you if they want to just talk about this stuff more?
Yeah, if you want to talk taxes or business or planning all day, Allie Colman, you can find me on LinkedIn. You can email me at allie.colman@aprio.com, or you can find me on Aprio's website and shoot me a message through there.
Amazing.
Eric, or you can put my you can do something with my email if you want. Put it in the description. I don't know if that's allowed.
we don't want your email being populated across the web.
Fair.
The spam will find you. All good. Allie, this is awesome. Thank you so much for your time. Joe, what you got? Anything?
Thank you, Allie. Aprio. You heard it here first. No, it's Aprio. All right. And also, did you guys notice that math I did? I don't know, 0.2%, 8%, something or other. All I know is that employee, they're getting a studio in the West Village for $1.8 million.
Amazing. Thank you, Allie. We will see you next week, everybody.
All right. Thank you. Bye.